that period, if you leave because the new mayor or president decides that you need to be replaced, then you get the money, the 9% of your check that you put into retirement, you get that back. You don't get any of the growth. You don't get any of the money that the city, parish government put in on your behalf. You don't get any of that. You don't get Social Security while you're doing it, right? So in effect, you're asking someone to come and take the job and just freeze putting away anything for retirement. Other than the money, it's like putting it in a shoebox and, hey, when you get removed, you get that money back. But you don't get any of the growth. You don't get any of the matching money. You don't get any of that. Well, we already don't pay the most competitive rates at our director's level. So you're basically asking someone to come in, get paid less than what they could get at the private sector, put their retirement on hold, and not be able to accrue those benefits in all likelihood, or certainly take the risk of losing out on all of that potential benefit. And so you're asking someone to come and do that, to me, which is almost like asking them to come do it out of the goodness of their heart. So one of the things that I asked Laurie to put in is this basically a 401k for these non-classified, non-civil service folks that we will then put in money into an account that they could take with them if in fact they're removed from that director's or other non-classified position. So they would get their shoebox of money back that they've been socking away, and they would get this little bit of this 401k back, so that it's still not nearly what you would get anywhere else, retirement, but their retirement is not totally frozen. There is a little bit of money that's being socked away for them that they then would be able to take if they were removed from the position.
So, to be clear,
yes,
you're saying every director within this government doesn't have retirement?
They have retirement, but the example I would, I'm trying to think of an example. Just picture somebody that came in under me, and let's say in 4 years, you know, I'll get hit by a bus and I'm gone. And the new mayor president comes in and says, you know what, we're going to go a different direction and replace them. Well, they've got 4 years that they've sucked money out of their check into the retirement system that grew and the city matched it. All they get is what came out of their check. They don't get any of the growth. They don't get any with the city. We keep all of that.
Why is that?
That's the law. And that's the
that again?
That's the law. That's the retirement system that we participate in. And so it is as unfair a retirement plan for directors, and it's a huge disincentive for anybody, internally or externally, that's considering taking the job to accept it, because when you lose your civil service protection, you can be replaced, as opposed to if you don't take the job and stay in civil service, you're still awarded some level of protection.
So to be clear, they only get back what they put in.
That's it.
No growth, nothing.
Shoebox. Just whatever you put in there, that's the exact same amount that comes back to you.
And this fund here is to help.
Just to be able to say, look, we understand that we're asking you to do this incredibly stupid financial decision. So what we're going to do is we're going to establish this 401k. I think it's 401I for government instead of a 401k, but for conversation purposes, just we all are more familiar with the 401k. We will put some money in there also for you, so that in the event you do have to leave, that you will have more than just the money that came out of your paycheck. And I don't think it totaled up for, Laurie, for everybody that we said qualified, it might have been $70,000, $80,000 a year. I mean, it wasn't a huge amount, but it allows me to have conversations with folks internally and externally saying, hey, I understand you're taking a huge risk retirement-wise, and a huge risk by giving up civil service. So we've got this program that we're offering up to kind of help offset some of that.
Thank you for the explanation. I understand, it's very clear.
Yeah,
Question.
and
the only other question I have would be, in this particular case, the funding is, what's the allocation on that?
That's a good question.
The allocation for IS&T is 87% to the city and 13% to the parish.
So out of that 80, I mean, that's what you're saying, you're just breaking it down based
So
on that.
about 9,000 of the 80-something comes from the parish, the rest comes from the city.
Well, some of those directors might have dedicated funding.
Well, that's true. Like,
So it would
for
be less.
police is all city. So it's, but that's
Got you.
but that's basically what we're
Did
talking
I
about.
say police?
No, you said some. I said police.
Some, oh, okay.
No, I just, because that's the city only. So they would have their own fund.
But they're civil service, so that would.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Okay. It's the only question I had.
No, I appreciate you bringing it up because it was something I wanted to discuss, so.
Yeah.
Because it is new and different, but there's a reasoning why we put it
Well, I
in.
mean, coming from the private sector into any government, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I didn't understand the retirement of that, because a lot of times the perception is when somebody retires, or when administration changes, so.
Yeah, and if you don't have 25 years, so basically, I would almost have to limit my recruiting to people 51 years, assuming I'm going to be here for the full 10, right? Somebody 51 and older, because they would at least hit 60, and that's only a 10-year requirement. Everyone else is under 25 years, or you don't get any of that.
And this
that
only
growth.
applies to the ones that are not civil service
Non-civil
protected,
service,
right?
correct, which is a handful.
Okay. Councilman Lewis.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, my question would be, they have to work the full 4 years, or if they decide to quit after 1 year or 6 months, do they still get what we contribute to
Yeah,
their?
the whole 401I or whatever it's called is basically, we're going to put money in and it's their money from day one. So whatever we put in, whether it be 1 year or whether it be, 20-something years, that would be their money.
Yes, ma'am.
We're self-insured that?
We'll look at the mechanics of it. We didn't get into the minute details because, it wasn't approved in it. But if it's in the budget, we'll set up a plan, and it could very well be something like for each week, we pay 1 week of that into the 401. So if somebody comes here just for 3 months, they're not going to get the whole thing. So if a director comes here, they're director for 3 months, they would just get 3 months' worth of that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing anything else on 151. Let's move to page 152. 152. Okay. I'm not seeing anything on page 152. At this time, let's move over to the 2019 capital, which will start on page 273. '73. Not seeing anything on 273 at the moment. 274. Page 274. At the top.
Just the total. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 4, we'll move to the Manning table, page 300. It's always good to touch the mics. I always try to put you on the spot, 300 Manning table. Not seeing anything on 300. 301. 301, top of the page. Manning table, 301. I'm not seeing anything at this time. Any public comment? You have had a easy one, huh? We talked about it in the back. You thought it would be rough. Pretty, it's not bad, huh?
No, not at all. Thank y'all very much.
Mr. J. Castillo makes it really tough, but he's not here. Oh, he just walked. Hey,
We're done.
yeah, we see what that. I did it on purpose. I could just sped the process so you would come. We walk it away. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Any closing remarks?
No, just that, recognition from the staff. I know a lot of them weren't here to be represented today, but they are very, very hard workers that support behind the scenes. So y'all don't really see that, but I do want to really recognize the hard work that they do each and every day, nights and weekends.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, staff members, for sticking around. We're going to move on to the last one, the big one, Department, Lafayette Police Department. We'll begin on page 153, but before we do that, we'll ask Finance to give us a quick overview of the department, and then we'll ask for opening comments from Chief Aguilar.
Sure, it'll be a short overview because I can't read the numbers on the page, so I'll wing it. The police department's budget is $35.5 million. That's their operating budget, not their capital budget. Their capital budget, we'll see that elsewhere. I think it's important to note that 10 years ago, the police department had a total strength of 337 positions. Back in 2013, when remember I spoke earlier and during the budget introduction about some budget cuts and staffing reductions, we got down to a low of 316 positions. Today, in this proposed budget, it's budgeted at 328 positions. That's 9 positions short than what we were 10 years ago. The police department is 100% funded from city revenues, most of that being from the city general fund. There is some dedicated property tax that is dedicated to the police, and that generates $7.3 million, or 20% of their operating needs. We are estimating that another $1 million, 3%, will come in from the traffic safety fund, and the rest will come from city non-restricted general fund revenues, and that's 74%, or $26 million.
Okay. How many positions you said we're behind compared to the past?
9 positions short from what it was 10 years ago.
Wow.
Pardon?
Go ahead, Mr. Mariota. Your mic's on. You got a question?
I know we mentioned ATAC earlier, though. Is that net of ATAC being moved?
It sure is. Sorry about that. That
No,
was
that's
6.
okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we're 3 short from what we were. Because that was 6 positions moved in ATAC,
I think it was 6.
6 or 7.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Laura, for that. I'm not seeing anybody up here right now want to speak. So, Chief, opening comments?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see everybody, and it's good to be here. Thank the Deputy Chief, Reginald Thomas, and Crystal Dumachette for all their work, and I thank my majors who are also here, and we're ready to get started.
That's what I'm talking about. Starting on page 153, operating expenses. 153. 153. I got a question, just, no, never mind. I'm good. Anybody else? 153? Okay, let's move next page, please. Okay. 154. Anybody? 154. Got a question. 154, 101, 3120, 502, 440, overtime criminal patrol, P5, 200,000. There was none budgeted before.
I think that's a movement from one classification to another. You look down at the bottom there, where you see, if you look in that last column, you'll see 100% decrease down from 200 to 0. We're just reclassifying that overtime.
Any particular reason why we have to reclassify it?
We created the downtown precinct, and we put that money into that budget.
Okay. Yeah. Huh? I asked on line item for the overtime criminal patrol. It was 200,000, just they moved the money for the downtown precinct. Okay. Anything else on 154?
I think you're needed in the back, Mr. Castillo. I thought I heard something.
There you go. Well, he's taking the place. Mr. Terrio's not here, so he's asking questions. Page 155. Page 155. Oh, we gotta have some fun. It's been a long time. Page 155. Anything? Councilman Call.
Noticing, I'm sorry, 1013130540071-0, security for LAGCO in kind, we're showing $60,000. It wasn't in the, it was actually 53, almost 60 in 16, 17. That's based on the fact that they're going to have a LAGCO event this coming year?
Yes, that's my
Okay,
understanding.
just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Every other year.
Right, every other year, I think it occurs.
Okay. Any other questions on 155? Okay. I am not seeing any at this time. Let's move to 156, page 156. Seeing none. Move to 157. Page 157. Seeing none. Next page, 158. 158. Councilman Boudreaux.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask to go back to 157.
$5. Page 157, we retroing back for Councilman Boudreaux.
This is going to be on the bottom half of the page, line item 101-3140, 54032, and this is the Metro Narcotics operations. I know there's been some recent adjustments, and I'm sure there's a need to leave some money in that account for any residual activity. My question is this sufficient enough to make sure that as you all continue to transition, that you could operate with this amount that's allocated here today?
Yes, sir, I believe it is, because we also have some forfeiture funds that we could tap into if we need to.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that'll be in the mail.
That's my boy. All right. Keep them rolling. All right. That was it on 158. Let's now move to the 5-year capital, page 261. 261. And it's item 84, fire range completion, and number 92, police. So let's see, page 261. Not seeing anything on 261. Anybody? 261. All right. Not seeing anything. Let's move to the 2019 capital. That'll begin on pages 274. 274. Page 274. Okay. Not seeing anything. 275. 275. All right, not seeing anything on 275. We'll now move to the Manning table, which would be page 301. Councilman Cone.
Chief, you've reported to the Police Liaison Committee in the past that you're having an issue with shortages of staffing your department. And I'm curious as to, first of all, what progress have you made for recruitment and training? And then what is the estimated time for putting the downtown precinct into full operation?
We've made some significant progress in recruiting and training. This year, we faced an unusually large amount of retirements. At the same time, we were hit with an unusually large amount of officers who left. And then also at the same time, we were hit with the unusual case of having to increase our SRO program by 10 officers. So putting all that together meant we had to really focus on recruiting efforts, and we have been, I believe, very successful with a short period of time. I can tell you that in the next police academy, I expect that there will be 18 officers from Lafayette PD represented, which is an unusually large amount. In the meantime, we're getting the numbers up. I think that ultimately, as you all know, it takes a considerable amount of time to get officers trained and prepared to work the streets. But with that said, I think that the delay caused by all of the things that occurred that I just mentioned has probably delayed us by about 3 to 4 months. And so I'm expecting that we will start catching up soon. Given it, we considered, given that it requires training and that everybody goes through training at different levels, different speeds, and it's hard to put a finite number on it, but as soon as we can, we will get back on the downtown precinct. I think that we had intended that that precinct be filled at least partially by now. I think we've been delayed 3 to 4 months as a result of everything else.
This is not in the budget, but it does relate to manning, excuse me, of your department. There's an article in the Advertiser on the website this afternoon, and I was interviewed yesterday for a report that will air tonight on Channel 3, and it deals with the proposed sales tax that's going to be on the ballot in December, the sales tax being proposed by the Sheriff's Office. And there are references in there that the sheriff has been negotiating or has been in a conversation with LCG regarding an intergovernmental agreement to perhaps allocate some of the revenues within the city of Lafayette to the police department purposes. Specifically, a number was mentioned, 40. Have you been in conversation with the sheriff regarding future manning opportunities with the sales tax revenue?
We had talked about it, and we had one meeting to discuss the tax revenue, the potential of us working together. I don't ever recall specifically talking about 40 officers at that time, although we did talk about increasing the manning tables to some degree with some of that funding, which would be helpful. The sheriff has chosen from the very beginning to negotiate with the police association members, which of course is not a real party to this conversation. At least they are a group of people that have no say-so for what this city does. And so as a result, we have come to this point today where there is still, to my knowledge, no agreement between the Sheriff's Office and the City of Lafayette. I know that there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of things in the news, and a lot of social media talk about this happening. When the sheriff and I specifically met about this issue, which was only on one occasion, I requested that he see the mayor as soon as he could to begin putting a plan together that both the sheriff and the city of Lafayette could live with, and so that we could move forward with this tax proposal. I can tell you that I was intrigued by the idea of us working together on something like this, and I explained to the sheriff that I would be willing to walk side by side with him on the streets of Lafayette as soon as there was an agreement in place between the city and the sheriff's office for this proposal. I would happily walk with him to try to promote it and get those dollars for our departments. However, to my knowledge, to this day, there is still no agreement. And as we saw with the developments this week, I'm not sure that the sheriff, I don't believe that he's had maybe in his own mind, a solid proposal until just recently, because I think there's been some recent changes, as we all saw, where it seems as though the Lafayette PD may be out of any of those discussions now.
Mr. Robideau, excuse me, there's reference to conversations with LCG, and I would ask you, have there been discussions, and to what extent?
Yes, about maybe a little over a week ago, the sheriff came to inform me that he was going to be changing the ballot language as it related to whatever other conversations he had been having before and that had been reported. He told me that it was going to go down to a half a penny instead of 3/4 of a penny, and also that he needed to be more specific in what the agreement with Lafayette City Police would be. It was a fairly casual conversation. He used 40 as an example in that conversation, in saying, so for instance, instead of just sharing half of the amount that the city collects, as was in the original proposal, that it would need to be more specific. For instance, X number of dollars for X number of officers. And so that conversation, lasted maybe 45 minutes, to where he just felt like he needed to give me a heads up about what direction he was going. He reached out to me a couple of times over the course of the last few days, asking if I knew exactly what the needs were. We were in the middle of budgeting and coming before you guys. I felt like it would have been inappropriate for me to say this is what we need until after we've had a chance to all talk about the police budget. And so he decided to move forward without any language that included the Lafayette City Police on the ballot. But again, I'm happy to continue having conversations. If there's an agreement that's legal and works, then something that I would certainly consider and bring forward. But at this point, there is none. There's nothing more than conversations at this point.
And in reading the language of the proposition that was submitted to the Bond Commission, it has no specific reference to Lafayette PD.
Right, all of that was removed.
And then the other point to be made is that even if we were in, and when I say we, you would be the one to propose an IGA, which would have to be approved by this council.
Correct.
Along with the budgeting allocation. This would not take effect, if it's approved, until April of 2019, and the first collections that he would probably see would be in May or June at the earliest. So while we're discussing the current or the proposed budget for 18-19, as we move forward, and if he indeed is successful at the voting booth, we wouldn't even begin to talk about the money allocations until perhaps the next budget, correct?
Correct.
Or maybe a mid-year adjustment.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Do we know if the language was removed because he didn't have a set number on what our needs were, because there was a deadline for the?
Certainly there was a deadline. I know that, he had to get that language into submitted into the Bond Commission in order for them to get on the agenda. And so, I wasn't privy to the conversation between he and his legal team on what the strategy was, but I just,
And I guess one of the other legal questions I have is, even if this was written in the Bond Commission, can you just give that money away? In other words, you go for the sheriff goes, but I mean, is it permissible to do something like that, get it passed, and just give that money to LCG or anybody without it? Or if it's written in the language, then it's okay to do that, or if it's not?
I'm not, again,
And then Mr. Scott's not here.
Yeah,
but
I'm not an attorney, so I really don't feel comfortable weighing in, but I'll give you my layman's opinion is that whether it's in the ballot language or not in the ballot language, I don't think determines whether it's illegal to do that agreement or not. I think that's a separate legal issue that is one of the things that we'll be looking into.
Got you. So the moral of the story is, as this thing progresses, there's more conversation and more details that have to be discussed.
A lot more.
Okay. All right. We were on 301, page 301. Bruce, you need to, no? Okay. 301, anybody? 301. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing anything on 301. Any public comment?
No, sir.
Okay. Any closing remarks, Chief?
Yes. Throughout the last several months, the last fiscal year, the Lafayette PD has seen many high points and many low points. And throughout all of that, I just wanted to say that as Chief of Police, it's been an honor to serve with you, to serve our city. I appreciate everything you guys have done for the PD in the last year very much. You guys really stepped up when we needed you, and it should not go unsaid. The thank you and the great appreciation and admiration I have for each of you. So I look forward to the next year. Thank you.
I guess this question would be administration, Laura, and Chief too. Being that he has a shortfall, has that ever been discussed to help get him get him where he needs compared to where we were before? You said 3.
No, I would just point out about the ATAC and then what effect that had. And the chief may have the numbers more readily available on the top of his head about where we were when he took office and where we are now as it relates to officers. But I'll just say, for me personally, the SRO thing kind of threw us for a loop because we had to reallocate officers to that program, which is a great program, and I was in support of doing so. But if Toby knows where we are and where we're short, then certainly that's conversations we all need to have.
I believe that when I took over, we had 267 police officers at the Lafayette Police Department. We now have 290 allotted to the department. So at what point we catch up and get our numbers back up, that's where we should be.
Okay.
290.
Cool. All right. I don't have anything else. I thank you very much. All right. Just to make a quick announcement, everyone is invited to a public hearing for the citizen input on the budget on any matter related to the budget, which will be held on Tuesday, August 21st at 5:30 p.m. during the regular scheduled council meeting. Please note the next departmental budget review is scheduled for Monday, August 13th, 2018 at 1 p.m. to hear the following departments: Fire, City Marshal, Public Works, and Capital, and Community Development. With that being said, meeting adjourned.